On a frosty Christmas Eve, just as the world around them sparkled with holiday lights and promise, Jackson Whittaker walked out of his high-rise apartment, leaving his pregnant wife, Camille, devastated and alone. In a single hour, her world shattered. The soft scent of cinnamon still hung in the air from cookies she had baked that afternoon, hoping to make the night feel like home. Her hands trembled as she stood in the foyer, one pressed instinctively to her growing belly, the other still reaching toward the door that had just closed behind him. Silent Christmas carols floated from the stereo, clashing cruelly with the deafening quiet he left behind. Little did she know that by morning, her face would be on every news channel across the country. What happened that night would send shockwaves through the media and their once loving marriage, revealing a labyrinth of hidden secrets, half-truths, and alliances so dark that even Jack, the man at the heart of it all, never imagined they'd see the light of day. Jackson Whittaker was born into a life most people only dream about. His father, Raymond Whittaker IV, ran a prestigious global investment firm, Whittaker Capital Partners, with connections to old money dynasties on the East Coast and aristocratic families abroad. His mother, Eleanor Whittaker, came from a long line of British antiquarians. By the time Jack was 6, he had already visited more countries than most people would in a lifetime. Summers were spent at a private estate in Tuscany, winters at a chalet in the French Alps. His friends often joked that Whittaker was just another word for privilege. But privilege came with a steep price: perfection. Jack had been groomed to carry the Whittaker legacy from childhood, finishing top of his class at Andover, then sailing through Yale with a degree in economics. He was brilliant, daring, and undeniably magnetic. Investors loved his boldness at 23. Board members saw him as visionary at 24. By 28, Jack landed on the cover of Fortune magazine as the youngest hedge fund phenom to make $1 billion. He thrived on the spotlight, fed off the applause, the admiration, and the power he wielded across financial markets. But with every deal closed, every accolade earned, there was a lingering question he couldn't silence. Was he doing any of it for himself, or simply living out a script written by generations before him? Nights were often spent alone in glass towers, surrounded by panoramic views of a city he never truly felt part of. Yet beneath the sharp suits and lavish events, like the annual Whittaker Foundation Gala at the Met, Jack carried a quiet emptiness. The pressure to outdo himself, to reach higher than the gold-plated expectations set by his parents, never ceased, and the constant media attention clung to him like a second skin. Then came Camille. Camille Brooks was the last woman anyone would expect to be with a billionaire. She came from humble beginnings in rural Vermont, her parents owning a small roadside diner known for its maple pancakes. Camille spent her youth working the cash register, serving weary travelers off Route 7 and collecting their stories. She developed a warm, approachable presence and an empathetic heart. After college, she dreamed of moving to Seattle and becoming an investigative journalist. She idolized Maria Shriver, Saul O'Brien, and Anderson Cooper to make her mark in a field where true opportunities were rare. She spent months pitching story ideas to local outlets, blogging in her spare time, and freelancing for small online magazines. Each rejection email stung like a personal failure, but she clung to her vision, working nights at a bookstore just to pay rent, while spending weekends chasing leads no one asked her to pursue. The dream wasn't just professional, it was personal. She wanted to uncover truth, to give voice to those who had none. Ironically, her first real job in the city had nothing to do with journalism. She became a research assistant at a non-profit legal advocacy group that specialized in uncovering corporate misconduct. One overcast November afternoon, she found herself swept up in a major press conference. A whistleblower was about to expose a high-profile executive, and journalists had shown up in force. It was there Camille first crossed paths with Jack Whittaker. He wasn't part of the scandal. In fact, his philanthropic foundation had been a quiet financial supporter of the nonprofit Camille worked for. He arrived impeccably dressed in a charcoal gray suit, exuding a quiet confidence that drew every eye in the room. Camille, juggling a thick binder full of sensitive documents, nearly ran into him while hurrying to pass last-minute notes to her supervisor. "Careful," Jack said gently as her papers flew into the air. We wouldn't want to compromise your hard work." She looked up, her face flushing. "I'm so sorry," she stammered. Jack knelt to help her gather the scattered pages. For a brief moment, their eyes met, and the buzz of the press conference seemed to fade into the background. Jack Whitaker, poised, powerful, was crouched on the floor, picking up papers for a stranger. He smirked. "Looks like you're the only one here more nervous than I am." Camille laughed, tension slipping from her shoulders. "It's my first big press event. I really don't want to screw this up." As Jack handed her the last set of documents, their fingers brushed. In that tiny contact, something shifted. For Jack, it felt like a rare moment of authenticity in a world built on image. And for Camille, it felt like something warm and grounding in a space that often felt cold and transactional, like her presence, her effort, had been seen. Their relationship took off faster than either of them expected. Jack had grown used to women dazzled by his fortune, women who saw him as a shortcut to status. He'd grown guarded around that kind of attention. But Camille was different. Down to earth, curious and sincere. She was skeptical at first. Men like Jack often hid behind layers, but after a handful of dinners, early morning coffees near her modest apartment in Capitol Hill, and a few nonprofit events they attended together, she saw the sincerity in him. When Jack talked about funding rural health programs in southern Chile, Camille's eyes lit up. She asked meaningful questions about the people, the needs, the deeper issues of inequality his foundation tried to address. Jack found himself opening up in ways he rarely did. He told her about the immense pressure he felt from his family, the weight of legacy, the exhaustion of always performing, the exhaustion of always being on, of constantly performing the role of the perfect Whitaker heir, weighed heavily on Jack. Camille never judged him. She never rushed to offer quick fixes or platitudes. She simply listened. And in doing so, she made him feel seen, not as a billionaire tycoon, but as a flawed man trying to find meaning. In those quiet moments, when he confessed his doubts and fears, she didn't try to solve him. She just stayed. And for a man who was always expected to lead, to dominate, to know, her quiet presence felt revolutionary. Their weekends became quiet escapes from the chaos of downtown Seattle to peaceful retreats in the Cascades. Jack taught her how to ski. Camille, in turn, taught him how to cook simple meals. They spent hours watching documentaries about journalism legends. Despite their different upbringings, they complemented each other, each one filling the cracks in the other's armor. They built a rhythm that felt sacred. In the world's eyes, they were an unlikely pair, but in each other's presence, they made perfect sense. One spring evening, 6 months after their first meeting, Jack proposed. It wasn't during a glitzy fundraiser or a luxury getaway. It happened in Camille's tiny kitchen in Capitol Hill, flour dusting his sleeves from their attempt at homemade pizza. She burst into tears, whispering yes through her sobs. The wedding came fast. The Whitaker name required a level of spectacle and status. Camille had wanted a modest, intimate ceremony, but Jack's parents insisted on hosting it at the Whitaker family estate outside Napa Valley, a sprawling vineyard and manor that had welcomed presidents, tech billionaires, and foreign dignitaries. The paparazzi set up camp outside the gates, desperate to catch a glimpse of the ordinary woman who had won the heart of America's youngest financial prodigy. Celebrities filled the guest list, business moguls like Jeff Bezos, cultural icons like Oprah Winfrey, who supported the Whitaker Foundation's global work. Even Elon Musk reportedly sent a handwritten note referencing a late-night chat he'd had with Jack about space-based humanitarian projects, half joke, half genuine, in true Musk fashion. Camille felt completely swept away by the grandeur. But as she walked down the aisle, eyes locked with Jack's, the noise faded. It was just them. They kissed under a sea of applause, and the newly minted Mrs. Camille Whitaker tried to ignore the weight of expectation her new identity brought. Their first year of marriage was joyful, filled with charitable trips and learning to make a home together in their luxurious yet unexpectedly cozy penthouse overlooking Elliott Bay. Camille took on the role of philanthropic advisor, helping evaluate programs and traveling to underserved areas around the globe. But beneath the glossy exterior, tensions simmered. Jack's father, Raymond Whitaker IV, had never truly accepted her. Camille thought he was polite, but there was a quiet disapproval laced into every question Raymond Whitaker asked, about her upbringing, her career goals, and her ability to withstand the social expectations of being a Whitaker. Eleanor Whitaker was warmer, more gracious in her manner, but even she kept Camille at arm's length, always holding her against a silent, unreachable standard. It felt less like a family and more like an interview she had yet to pass. Every visit left her emotionally drained, smiling on the outside, questioning herself on the inside. The tabloids only made it worse. They followed Camille with unrelenting focus, digging into her small-town roots for anything remotely scandalous. They spun vague rumors into flashy headlines like "Diner Girl and Over Her Head" and "Whitaker Bride, Love or Ambition." Jack did his best to shield her, but every magazine cover, every paparazzi shot reminded Camille that her life was constantly under a microscope. What once felt like fairy tale romance now came with fine print, constant judgment, surveillance, and the pressure to appear flawless. Still, Jack and Camille fought to keep their relationship strong. They carved out weekly date nights away from the public eye, sometimes hiding out in dimly lit diners in West Seattle, other times walking hand in hand through Gasworks Park under baseball caps and scarves. But as Jack's responsibilities at Whitaker Capital deepened, so did the demands on his time. Late-night strategy calls, back-to-back flights to Singapore, urgent investor briefings. Camille found herself more and more alone in a penthouse full of staff she barely knew. Her philanthropic work was routinely overshadowed by the media's obsession with her image. The sense of purpose she once found in her work started to feel diluted, buried beneath questions about her wardrobe or baby bump. After 2 years of juggling high society events, globe-trotting charity efforts, and constant scrutiny, Camille discovered she was pregnant. She told Jack one quiet morning, surprising him with a tiny pair of knitted baby socks she had found at a boutique in Pike Place Market. Jack's face lit up instantly. He pulled her into his arms, swearing he'd pull back from the chaos, that he'd be a hands-on, loving father. And for a while, he tried. He turned down late meetings, shifted more responsibility to his trusted CFO and longtime friend, Marcus Delaney. Camille, glowing with hope, began envisioning their life as a family. She even imagined them moving into a classic brownstone in Queen Anne, something cozier, more rooted, with space for a child to grow up knowing neighbors and trees. It was the kind of dream that reminded her of home, a life built not on power, but on connection. But reality crept in. A massive merger was in motion at Whitaker Capital, one involving a major Scandinavian bank, partially owned by a Gulf sovereign wealth fund. It was high stakes, delicate, and the kind of deal that could take the Whitaker dynasty to a new tier of global influence. Raymond insisted Jack take the reins personally. His calendar quickly filled again. Camille tried to be patient, but with every passing day she felt more like a footnote in her husband's life. When she voiced her unease, Jack would offer soft reassurances. "Just a little longer, Camille. After this deal, we'll disappear to Bali." No press, no calls. Still, the baby grew inside her, and with it a quiet sense of uncertainty. By the time December arrived, Seattle had become a glittering winter postcard. The Whitaker family was expected to gather for Christmas Eve at the Napa estate. Camille, now almost 7 months pregnant, Camille wanted nothing more than a quiet, cozy Christmas Eve with Jack. Her parents driving in from northern Vermont, maybe a few close friends gathered around a fireplace. But the Whitakers had their tradition, an extravagant Christmas Eve ball that doubled as a high-profile fundraiser. Politicians, celebrities, and Fortune 500 CEOs filled the guest list. Raymond and Eleanor pushed hard for Camille to attend, to present the image of a poised future mother of the Whitaker heir, fully invested in the family's philanthropic image. Jack was torn. He knew Camille was worn thin, physically, emotionally, but the ball was also a critical moment. A chance to strengthen partnerships and build more momentum for the looming merger. He promised her it would be less formal than usual, that she could make a short appearance, greet a few people, then head upstairs early. Camille reluctantly agreed. She selected a simple emerald green gown that highlighted her pregnancy gracefully, intentionally avoiding the flashier fashion the Whitaker parties usually demanded. She stood before the mirror, hand resting on her belly, whispering to herself that she could get through the night. Just a few hours. Just one last performance. The evening was poised to become one she'd never forget. On Christmas Eve, the Whitaker estate buzzed with coordinated staff in black uniforms, setting crystal glasses and gilded flatware. A quartet played softly in the foyer while guests arrived in sleek black cars and luxury SUVs. Outside the gates, cameras waited, lights flashing in bursts as each arrival was documented. Camille stepped from their Bentley beside Jack, the pop of flashbulbs bright against the night. Jack placed a steadying hand on her back, guiding her through the main doors. Inside, the mansion sparkled. Christmas trees in every room, each themed in elaborate detail. Society's elite mingled around them, CEOs, ambassadors, media moguls. Camille felt the quiet stares that followed her baby bump, the hushed comments about the next generation of Whitakers. Her pulse quickened, not from excitement but from the intense need to escape the scrutiny. She kept her chin up, reminding herself, this was all for charity. Soon, Jack was swept into a conversation with a cluster of European bankers. Camille, suddenly alone, drifted toward the open-air terrace to breathe. That's where she spotted Marcus Delaney, Jack's longtime friend and CFO, nursing a glass of champagne. "Marcus," she greeted softly. "Jack's back at work already, huh?" He gave her a half smile. "I tried to talk him into slowing down tonight, but you know Jack, especially with the merger hanging in the balance." Camille sighed. "I just wanted one night that felt normal." Her voice cracked slightly, the exhaustion behind her words betraying just how deeply she meant it. Before Marcus could respond, a stillness settled over the terrace. Raymond Whitaker appeared, flanked by staff and board members. "Camille," he called, gesturing her over. "We need you and Jack inside. Group photo with the board. It's important for the Whitaker image." Suppressing an eye roll, Camille followed him. She took her place beside Jack, mustering a practiced smile while the cameras snapped away. Beyond the lenses, she spotted her parents. They stood awkwardly at the back, clearly out of place amid the wealth and spectacle. Her heart ached. She wanted to walk over, to share a quiet moment of holiday joy. But just as quickly, Jack was pulled aside again, this time by a circle of Dubai investors. Camille made a step toward him when a wave of dizziness hit her, sudden and strong. She hadn't eaten much that day, and pregnancy had made her more susceptible to sudden fatigue. Camille steadied herself on a nearby chair, blinking away the specks dancing in her vision. Then she heard it. A muffled but heated argument coming from behind one of the closed doors off the main hallway, the entrance to Raymond Whitaker's private study. She recognized Jack's voice. Sharp, angry. Another voice fired back, Raymond's. Despite her better judgment, Camille moved closer to the door. She could only catch fragments, not your puppet. The legacy, bad timing. The baby, my decision. Each word sank like a stone in her chest. She pressed her hand to her belly instinctively, as if to shield the child from the storm of words spilling into the hallway. Her pulse quickened. Her breath came shallow. A chill ran up her spine despite the warmth of the room. Suddenly, the door flung open. Jack stood there, face flushed, eyes burning with fury. Behind him, Raymond's composed demeanor had cracked, his expression radiating cold, silent rage. Jack's eyes landed on Camille. "We're leaving," he said, voice tight and shaking. He grabbed her hand, pulling her through the hallway past stunned guests who parted silently as they passed. Camille struggled to keep pace, heels slipping on the polished floor, her growing belly making her movements clumsy. The sharp click of her heels against the marble echoed like drum beats, each step a surge of confusion and dread. Outside, their driver scrambled to open the Bentley's door, but Jack waved him off. He clicked the key fob, and the engine roared to life. Without another word, he slid behind the wheel. They sped away from the estate, the glittering lights of the Whitaker holiday ball shrinking in the rearview mirror. For several minutes, Jack said nothing. His grip on the steering wheel was rigid, knuckles white. Camille watched him in silence before gathering the courage to ask, "What happened?" He let out a ragged breath. "I can't keep doing this. My father's trying to push me into choices that compromise everything I've worked for." He shook his head. "He wants me to give up our life, our plans, for the sake of the Whitaker name. It's always about the legacy, always." Camille swallowed. "But what does that mean for us?" Jack glanced at her, his eyes flickering between her face and her stomach. "I don't know anymore." His words sliced through the air, blunt and terrifying in their honesty. The silence that followed felt louder than any argument could have. They drove the rest of the way in silence. Back at the penthouse, the elevator opened into a scene that felt surreal. Christmas decorations shimmered across the marble floors, gold and ivory ornaments on a towering tree, fresh garlands wrapped around pillars, the faint scent of cinnamon lingering in the air. But none of it matched the energy between them. Camille set her coat aside and turned to Jack. "Talk to me," she said softly. He stopped in his tracks. His eyes, filled with conflict and exhaustion, met hers. "I can't," he whispered. "God, Camille, everything's falling apart. The merger, the pressure from my father, the board, and now the baby." Her chest tightened. "What do you mean, and now the baby? We both wanted this child." Camille's voice cracked. Jack ran a hand through his hair, his eyes heavy with frustration. I do. But everything's collapsing at once. My father's threatening to pull my position if I don't follow his playbook. The media's all over us." He took a step back. "I can't breathe." His voice was strained, the weight of pressure pressing down like a vice, tightening with every syllable. Tears welled in Camille's eyes. "So what, you're just gonna walk out? On me? On us?" Jack began pacing across the polished floor. I need space. I can't think straight. I've never felt so trapped." He looked like a man cornered, stripped of control. The pain that washed over her wasn't physical. It was sharp, emotional. Camille eased herself onto the couch, fighting the sob tightening in her chest. "I'm 7 months pregnant, Jack, and you're talking about needing space? We're supposed to be a team." Her voice trembled with disbelief, her hands unconsciously wrapped around her stomach, protective, aching. A memory surfaced, sudden, unwanted. She was 9 years old again, curled in the back booth of her parents' diner, trying not to cry as her father stormed out during another fight. Her mother had said, "He just needs space." Camille had hated that phrase ever since, and now here it was again, dressed in a different voice but cutting just as deep. He reached for his coat and keys. "I'm sorry," he murmured, "but I can't be here tonight. I need to clear my head." Panic surged in her chest. "Jack, it's Christmas Eve." His expression was conflicted, but his voice stayed firm. "I'll call you tomorrow. I promise. I need this." Before she could stop him, he was out the door. It shut with a heavy finality that echoed through the quiet penthouse. The sound rang in her ears longer than it should have, a cruel punctuation on a night unraveling. Camille sat still, stunned. The room felt foreign, hollow, just twinkling Christmas lights blinking quietly across the tree like stars too far away to reach. Everything around her looked perfect, untouched, except her. The baby shifted inside her, a cruel reminder that she wasn't alone, but also that the person she needed most had just walked out. She tried calling him, no answer. She texted, nothing. Some holiday song began to play from the speaker system, cheery, soft, entirely unwelcome. The sound felt like mockery, the notes bouncing off cold marble and her fraying heart. She thought of calling her parents. But she couldn't bring herself to ruin their evening. They were probably still at the Whitaker estate, out of place and trying their best to smile through the formalities. She didn't want them driving through icy roads in the middle of the night because of Jack's crisis. Camille paced the penthouse, silent tears streaking her cheeks, until exhaustion finally pulled her down. She drifted into restless sleep in the early hours of the morning. The TV was still on in the background, looping holiday specials and late-night interviews. When she woke near dawn, the dread was still there, heavy and unmoving. She slipped out of bed and padded into the living room, instinctively scanning for signs that Jack had come home. The sofa was untouched. The penthouse was silent. Even the Christmas lights now seemed dimmer. Feeling anxious, she turned on the news. At first, it was just noise, weather forecasts, traffic, light-hearted holiday coverage. Then the ticker at the bottom of the screen caught her attention. Breaking, Whitaker family turmoil. Her stomach twisted. She raised the volume. The anchor's voice came through, unusually somber, in a surprising development. This Christmas morning, shocking developments are unfolding involving the Whitaker family. Multiple sources report that Jackson Whitaker, heir to Whitaker Capital, has left his pregnant wife, Camille Whitaker, and is currently unaccounted for. There are unverified claims that his sudden departure may be linked to the upcoming European merger. Stay tuned for more updates. Camille's mouth went dry. Her phone buzzed in her hand. Calls, texts, all flooding in. She flipped to another channel. Same headline, same speculation. And there it was. A photograph of her from the night before, standing beside Jack at the Whitaker holiday ball, now plastered across the screen. The caption, "Where is Jackson Whitaker?" Her panic mounted. How was this all happening so fast? Why was the media dragging her into a business scandal? And why did it sound like they were already pointing fingers? She called Jack again, straight to voicemail. Seconds later, the intercom rang. "Mrs. Whitaker," her doorman's voice came through, tight with concern. "There are at least 6 reporters in the lobby. They're asking for a statement. Should I call security?" Camille's heart raced, her hands trembled. She felt trapped, blindsided. Just hours ago, her husband had walked out on Christmas Eve. Now the world knew, and wanted answers she didn't have. The walls of the penthouse, once a place of comfort, now seemed to close in on her with every unanswered call. In a panic, she called Marcus Delaney. The phone rang 4 times before he picked up, his voice thick with sleep. "Camille, what's going on? What time is it?" She tried to explain through her shaking voice. "The news is saying things about me, about Jack, and something about a scandal with the merger. Marcus, I'm scared." Her voice cracked on the last word, the fear crawling up her spine like ice. He cursed under his breath. "I just woke up to a storm of messages too. Listen to me. I'm coming over. Don't speak to anyone. Keep the doors locked. If Jack calls, you tell me immediately." Within 30 minutes, Marcus arrived, looking as thrown together as she felt. Sweater, jeans, worry lining his face. Camille stood in the foyer, still in the same robe from the night before. Her reflection in the mirror looked like a stranger. Eyes wide, skin pale, lips pressed tight to keep from falling apart. Outside, camera crews were setting up along the sidewalk, their lenses already aimed toward the building. "I've been trying to reach Jack too," Marcus said, pulling her into a brief, steadying hug. No response. "This rumor about him disappearing and leaving you on Christmas Eve? That part's not entirely false." Camille nodded, breath catching in her throat. The humiliation and confusion churned inside her. This wasn't just a personal crisis anymore. It was becoming public spectacle. "The press is spinning it hard, calling it a meltdown tied to the merger," Marcus added. "They're also pushing some wild narrative that you might have threatened to expose something inside Whitaker Capital." Camille's eyes widened. "What? That's ridiculous. I've never done anything like that." "I know," Marcus said grimly, "but rumors thrive on uncertainty. People can smell blood. And I'd bet anything Raymond's already shifting into full damage control." "They probably want you to stay quiet," Marcus said softly. A fresh wave of hurt and anger surged through Camille. "Jack promised he'd come back. Now he won't even answer his phone, and I'm the one being dissected by the press." Her voice trembled with disbelief, every syllable carrying the weight of betrayal. "Let's see what we can find," Marcus said, opening his laptop. "I'll try to get in touch with the Whitaker PR team, see what the actual story is." Over the next few hours, the media frenzy escalated. Clips of Camille's tear-streaked face leaving the Whitaker estate looped across news channels and gossip blogs. Speculation ran wild. Was Jack afraid of fatherhood? Were there shady dealings about to surface? Was Camille blackmailing the Whitakers? The blackmail rumor hit hardest. She'd never once asked Jack for favors or used his name to gain influence. Even after marrying into unimaginable wealth, Camille had worked hard to maintain her independence. Now, her name was being dragged through the mud in headlines she couldn't control. The injustice burned. By mid-afternoon, Marcus managed to connect with the PR director for Whitaker Capital. He relayed the message with a grim expression. "They're denying the blackmail rumors," he said, "but they're also refusing to comment on why Jack left. Officially, they're saying he's taking personal time, and they want you to do the same. No interviews, no statements." Camille blinked. "They're leaving me out to dry. I was abandoned on Christmas Eve, and now I'm just supposed to vanish?" Her words were laced with disbelief, her hands trembling at her sides. Marcus placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "I don't like it either, but with a deal this big, even the smallest ripple can sink it. They're trying to protect the merger." She pressed her hand to her stomach, feeling the baby kick. "And what about protecting me? This stress can't be good." Her voice cracked and she looked down at her belly as if silently apologizing to the child inside her. His voice softened. And that's why I'm here. We'll figure it out. Maybe call your parents. Have them come here. Camille nodded, tears welling up. Yeah, I need them. She hated the vulnerability in her voice, but right now she didn't care. Later that afternoon, while Marcus took calls in another room, Camille scrolled through her phone. A subject line caught her eye. You need to see this. The sender was anonymous. A strange address. Her thumb hovered for a moment before she tapped it open. Inside was a PDF file labeled Whiteacre Merger Confidential.pdf. Her heart began to race. She opened the attachment. Page after page of financial documents, internal emails, legal memos. Her breath caught. There were implications of bribery, foreign accounts, shell corporations, offshore tax havens, and Jack's name appeared several times. Some messages hinted that he had uncovered the corruption and was resisting it. If he backed out, Raymond's entire plan could fall apart. Camille's thoughts spun. Could this be why Jack left? Had he been pressured by his own father? Was he protecting her or protecting himself? And was Raymond trying to paint her as the threat? With her background in nonprofit law and investigative work, it made twisted sense. Maybe they feared she'd blow the whistle. The realization cut deep. This wasn't just personal. It was strategic, ruthless. She was just about to show Marcus the files when her phone rang. The screen lit up with Raymond Whitaker. Her chest tightened. She answered. His voice was smooth, controlled, cold. Camille, I'd strongly advise you not to speak to the press. The situation is extremely delicate. We wouldn't want you misrepresenting the family. Raymond's voice carried an icy weight. Camille's frustration boiled over. I haven't said anything, but maybe you could tell me where Jack is. Her voice quivered with disbelief, a fragile attempt to maintain control in the face of calculated cruelty. A pause. Jack is taking time to reconsider his position. That's all you need to know. As for you, I suggest you stop involving yourself in matters beyond your reach. Anger surged through her. Excuse me, I'm his wife. This does concern me, and I'm carrying his child. Raymond's tone shifted, darker, threatening. And that is exactly why I'm advising you to tread carefully. The Whitaker name carries enough weight to protect or to destroy. Good day, Camille. The line went dead. Her hands shook as she set the phone down. She had never trusted Raymond, but now, to hear him threaten her so directly made everything real. More dangerous. The conversation echoed in her mind like a warning bell, pushing the fear into something sharper. Resolve. She turned to Marcus, showed him the confidential files. He read in stunned silence, his face paling with each page. If this is real, Whitaker Capital is on the verge of orchestrating massive fraud. If this ever goes public, it could bury the entire firm. Camille was resolute. We have to find Jack. If he's resisting this from the inside, he could be at risk. Marcus tried calling him again, straight to voicemail. He reached out to colleagues, friends. No one had heard from Jack since the night before. Each unanswered call tightened the knot in Camille's chest. A silent confirmation that something was terribly wrong. Camille sat in silence, weighing her options. Her instincts, sharpened from years following stories, screamed that leaking these documents without care could backfire. If Jack was somehow entangled in this, exposing it too fast could hurt him. But staying quiet would betray everything she believed in. I'm going to reach out to a journalist I trust, she said firmly. Not to publish, at least not yet, but to help verify the documents. Her voice no longer trembled. It carried conviction. Marcus nodded slowly. We'll need to keep this quiet. The Whitaker PR team will be ruthless if they think you're behind any leaks. Camille steeled herself. The fear that had gripped her since Christmas Eve had given way to clarity. The image of Raymond's cold warning still lingered, but so did the fire in her chest. I won't let them silence me. Not this time. Outside, the news vans were piling up. Media crews clustered along the sidewalk below the penthouse, demanding statements, speculating wildly. Some claimed Jack had left the country. Others suggested Camille was working with federal investigators. She tried to shut it out. The world could talk, but she had work to do, work that might determine everything. Finally, her parents arrived, led in discreetly by security through the building's service entrance. They wrapped her in quiet comfort, but even their presence couldn't erase the heaviness in the air. Later, Camille made a call to Sarah Blake. an old college friend now working as an investigative journalist for a well-known national paper. Sarah agreed to meet discreetly that evening at a quiet cafe just a few blocks away, far from cameras. Despite Marcus's hesitations, Camille bundled herself in a thick coat and scarf, slipped through the building's underground parking exit, and hailed a cab. In her bag was a folder of printed documents, the files from the anonymous email. Her hands trembled as she clutched it tight, every heartbeat louder than the city's noise. Her heart pounded with every block they passed. At the cafe, Sarah greeted her with a firm hug. "I've been watching the news. Are you okay?" Camille gave a small shrug. "Not really, but there's something much bigger going on, and I need your help verifying these." Sarah's eyes widened as Camille pulled out the documents. She flipped through them quickly, eyebrows furrowed, scribbling notes into a small leather-bound notebook. "This is enormous, Camille. If these are legitimate, it doesn't just implicate Whitaker Capital. There are international banks involved. This could shake the financial world." Camille nodded. "That's why I need to be sure. Jack, I think he found this out. I think that's why he left, and I believe Raymond's trying to force him into silence." Her voice cracked, the weight of suspicion she'd been carrying finally given a name. Sarah's face was serious. "I'll run them through my contacts, but once this starts, you can't take it back. Are you ready for what comes next?" Camille swallowed hard. If it protects Jack and the truth, it's worth it. Her fingers tightened around her coffee cup. Courage wasn't the absence of fear, she realized, but what she did despite it. Back at the penthouse, Sarah's investigative team worked through the night. They traced code strings, authenticated email metadata, and contacted financial analysts familiar with mergers of this scale. By morning, Sarah sent Camille a secure message. "They're real. Multiple confirmations. This is a powder keg." Camille's breath caught. It was validation and confirmation of just how deep the conspiracy ran. It was no longer a theory. It was real, and it was dangerous. That same morning, a text arrived from an unknown number. "Jack is safe. If you want to see him, come to 3445 West 57th St. Parking Level B, 11 p.m. Come alone." Hope flooded her chest, followed by dread. Was it real? Or a trap? She showed Marcus the message. He frowned. "That's a garage near the old Midtown offices, secluded. If it's legit, it could be Jack. But if it's not..." Camille placed a hand over her belly, heart racing. "I'm going. I have to." There was no choice. Love didn't wait, and neither could she. At 10:45 p.m., she quietly left the penthouse. Reporters clustered near the entrance, but she bypassed them, sliding into the back of an Uber and instructing the driver to let her off a block away. Her pulse thundered as she stepped into the dimly lit structure. The booth attendant barely glanced at her as she walked past. Concrete columns loomed in every direction. Rows of idle cars sat silent under flickering lights. Then, a tall figure stepped out from behind one of the pillars. Camille's breath caught. It was Jack. She gasped, tears springing to her eyes. Jack looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, clothes wrinkled. But he was there, alive, real. They rushed into each other's arms. For a long moment, neither spoke. They just held on, clinging to the one thing that still felt solid. His heartbeat against hers was frantic, but familiar, the rhythm of something once broken, now trying to mend. Finally, Jack pulled back slightly, eyes searching hers. "Camille, I'm so sorry. I couldn't stay. I found things about the merger, awful, illegal things." He exhaled. "My father, he expects me to play along. When I refused, he threatened me. He threatened us." Camille blinked back tears. "I know. I've seen the documents. Jack, you should have told me." "I didn't want to drag you into it," he said, voice low. "But it looks like it's too late." Regret thickened his tone, like he'd aged years in the days they'd been apart. She cupped his face in her hands. "We're in this together. Whatever your father is doing, whatever Whitaker Capital is doing, it ends now." Jack nodded slowly, eyes glinting. "I want to expose them. I want to do what's right. But I'm scared of what he might do to you, to our child." Camille's voice was steady. "We're not hiding. I already contacted a journalist. The story's being verified." A flicker of pride sparked in her voice, masked by calm determination. His eyes widened. Hope flickered across his face, tempered with anxiety. "If we go public, this could destroy everything. My family's empire, our wealth. We'll be targets." She held his hand tightly. "I don't care about the money. I care about you. and our child, and raising them in the light, not under the shadow of corruption. She wasn't just standing by him, she was holding up the truth they both believed in. Jack let out a shaky breath and pulled her into another embrace. Then we do it. Together. Outside, the wind swept through Seattle streets like a warning, but inside the hushed offices of the Sentinel, the storm had already begun. Just before noon, the headline went live. Whitaker Capital's secret web. Bribes, shell companies, and a family divided. Top fold front page. Sarah Blake's team had verified every detail. Every document Camille had provided. Jack had added more. Encrypted files, internal memos, emails linking Whitaker Capital to shady financial networks, foreign officials, and multinational institutions. It was irrefutable, and the world noticed. By the hour, media outlets picked up the story. Networks interrupted regular programming. Stock tickers plunged. Whitaker Capital lost billions in market value. Government investigations were announced. Social media exploded with hashtags, Whitaker leak, legacy exposed. In their penthouse, Jack and Camille watched the headlines roll in. The same media that once glorified them now told a story not of wealth, but of conscience. Jack paced before the TV, hand through his hair. "It's real now," he murmured. "No going back." Camille rose and took his hand, steady. "That's the point. We don't go back. We go forward." Her words anchored them in the storm, simple but unshakable. That evening, Anderson Cooper aired a primetime interview with Jack, filmed under tight security. He didn't name names, but he confirmed the documents. He spoke about the pressure, the threats, the lies, the moment where he had to choose, loyalty or truth. His voice only trembled once, when he said, "I couldn't bring a child into this world while carrying that kind of darkness." The public's reaction was instant and intense. Some branded Jack a traitor to his legacy. Others hailed him as a hero, a whistleblower who had dared to confront corruption even when it meant turning against his own family. But in the quiet moments of their home, as Camille held his hand and laid her other palm gently across her belly, none of that mattered. The chaos outside faded in those minutes. The headlines, the opinions, the noise, all dimmed beneath the sound of her heartbeat syncing with his. They had chosen truth. And from that truth, a new kind of legacy was taking shape. The fallout was immediate and seismic. Overnight, Whitaker Capital went from a symbol of global financial prestige to a case study in greed and collapse. Headlines rolled across every screen in America. The company's stock plummeted, investors fled. Regulators launched investigations in the US, across Europe, and into the Middle East. Jack's name, once synonymous with wealth, power, and promise, was now etched alongside words like whistleblower, betrayal, and courage. The press dubbed it the fall of the Whitaker dynasty. Still, in the whirlwind of chaos and commentary, Jack and Camille stayed grounded. They refused interviews, turned down lucrative book and documentary offers. Camille focused on her health, her pregnancy, on reclaiming peace amid the noise. She found serenity in small rituals. Journaling in the mornings, sipping chamomile tea at sunset, listening to classical music with her hand resting where their child kicked. Her doctor, worried about the emotional strain, recommended rest and media blackout. Jack complied without hesitation. He powered off the TV, shut the laptop, and stayed close. "I'm not going to lose what matters most," he whispered to her one evening, tracing soft circles on her belly. "The company's gone. My father's empire is in ruins. But you and him, you're everything now." His voice cracked with emotion he couldn't contain, not from regret, but from gratitude. Camille squeezed his hand. "You didn't lose anything worth keeping. You let go of something toxic. That takes strength." Despite the upheaval, they weren't entirely alone. Marcus Delaney remained a loyal ally. He helped Jack manage what was left of his assets. Though most of Jack's wealth had been tied up in Whitaker Capital, now nearly worthless, his independent investments were enough to secure their future. And slowly, public opinion shifted. Where there had once been scandal, now there was admiration. Camille's composure, Jack's integrity, their shared courage. People saw them not as elitists clinging to power, but as human beings who had chosen conscience over comfort. For many, they became a symbol not of downfall, but of redemption. The path ahead remained uncertain. But one thing was undeniable. They had not only survived the storm, they had changed the weather. They had traded privilege for principle, power for purpose, and for the first time in their lives, they could look at each other, with nothing hidden, with unwavering, fearless honesty. The new year arrived not with celebration, but with subpoenas. Raymond Whitaker III, once the commanding patriarch of one of America's most revered financial empires, was now at the center of a high-stakes congressional investigation. Televised hearings captivated the nation. It was rare to witness a man of his stature questioned so publicly. His polished empire was now under the microscope of federal regulators and lawmakers. In the Whitaker penthouse, Jack and Camille sat side by side on the living room couch, hands intertwined. Baby supplies were stacked neatly in the corner, ready for the coming weeks. The television flickered quietly, but the tension in the room hummed louder than the broadcast. Neither of them spoke much. They didn't have to. The weight of everything unspoken filled the space between their clasped hands. Raymond sat rigid before the committee, his silk tie knotted perfectly, but the old poise, the arrogance, had faded into something tighter, thinner. Page after page of records spilled across the hearing room. Bribes, shadow partnerships, hidden accounts. Each revelation was another blow to decades of unchecked power. For Jack, it was surreal. The man on screen had once taught him to ride a bike, to shake hands firmly, to carry the Whitaker name with confidence. But that name had been hollowed by lies. Camille sensed his quiet pain and leaned her head against his shoulder. "You're not responsible for his choices," she murmured. "You made your own. That's what makes you different." Her voice was soft but firm, the kind of truth that steadied rather than soothed. That night, Jack's phone buzzed. "Father," the screen read. He stared at it. Then, slowly, answered. Raymond's voice was subdued, worn down. "You've destroyed everything I built." Jack's reply was steady, almost quiet. "No, you destroyed it the moment your legacy mattered more than your integrity." A long silence. Then Raymond spoke once more, the words thin and cracking. "Take care of that child. Be better than I was." The line went dead. Jack stared at the screen, his own reflection faint in the darkened glass. Camille moved closer, wrapping her arms around him. They sat in silence, grief and relief mingling in the space between them. The final bond had broken, not in fury, but in release. In that moment, the last thread between father and son snapped, not with bitterness, but with quiet surrender. The old world had ended, and a new one, unformed, uncertain, was just beginning. Winter still gripped the city. Snow clung to sidewalks, and the sky wore a steel-gray frown. It was the kind of day that masked everything in silence, but inside the penthouse something was stirring. It started quietly, just after dawn. Camille shifted in bed, a dull ache pulling across her lower back. She dismissed it at first, another late pregnancy pain. But minutes later, the cramp returned, sharper, closer together. Her breath caught. She placed her hand gently on her belly, round and tense. "Not yet," she whispered. "It's too early." Her voice cracked at the edges, part plea, part realization. Jack, half asleep in a nearby armchair after a long night on legal calls, snapped awake at the sound of her voice. "The baby's coming," she said, voice trembling, but focused. Within minutes, they were in a black SUV, racing through early morning streets. Sirens echoed in the distance, and headlights carved through the fog. Outside, the world seemed to hold its breath. The red lights stretched forever for Camille. Time seemed to warp, pain and anticipation blurring into one. By the time they reached the hospital, the sun had just begun to rise. The nurses moved quickly, guiding Camille through check-in as Jack gripped her hand, murmuring quiet encouragement between clenched teeth. Labor came fast, too fast. Their baby wasn't due for another month. There was no time to brace emotionally, no time for the plans they'd made. It was raw, immediate, real. Each contraction crashed over Camille like a wave, unrelenting and overwhelming, but she clung to Jack's voice like a lifeline, steady, urgent, loving. Camille focused through the fear. Every push was powered by love and the urgent hope to meet the tiny life waiting to be born. And then he was here. Their son, small, pink, crying with a strength that surprised even the doctors. Jack's hands trembled as he cut the cord. Tears streamed down Camille's cheeks, her body trembling, not from pain but from the powerful mix of exhaustion and awe. It felt like waking from a nightmare and finding light. Camille cried, not from pain but from release, from joy, from the overwhelming truth that they had made it through. The scandal, the fear, the loss of everything familiar. And now, this. "He's perfect," Jack whispered, holding their child to his chest. They named him Oliver, a name for peace, for growth, for new beginnings. In that moment, the cameras didn't exist. Neither did legacy or scandal or Wall Street. There was only this newborn child and two people who had fought for something better. In the sterile calm of the hospital room, love didn't shout. It simply was. The months after the exposé passed in a blur of change. What had once defined Jack and Camille, boardrooms, black tie events, bold headlines, felt like echoes from a world they no longer belonged to. The Whitaker name had vanished from the covers of financial journals. In its place, a quieter legacy began to emerge, one whispered in stories about justice, ethics, and courage. Raymond Whitaker III, once seen as untouchable, stepped down from the board of Whitaker Capital. The company entered a painful restructuring process, overseen by federal regulators and newly appointed court-approved leadership. Many of Raymond's closest allies faced charges. Though he avoided prison by cooperating and paying heavy penalties, his reputation was shattered beyond repair. Jack, now fully detached from the Whitaker dynasty, made no move to claim his stake. "Let them rebuild it without me," he told Camille. "I want our future to mean something." So together, they built something new. With Camille's nonprofit legal experience and Jack's business insight, they launched a foundation. Clear Path, a nonprofit dedicated to ethical entrepreneurship and corporate transparency. They didn't chase headlines, they chased reform. They elevated the voices of whistleblowers, supported systemic change, and mentored a new generation of leaders unafraid to do what was right. Camille also breathed new life into her old dream of investigative journalism. She launched a podcast called Inside the Veil. It was raw, thoughtful, and deeply personal. She interviewed corporate insiders, lawyers, activists, people on the front lines of the fight for reform. Her calm, empathetic interviewing style, paired with Jack's occasional candid reflections, quickly built a loyal audience. The Whitaker name no longer sparkled with prestige, but it carried something even more valuable: credibility, respect from communities that valued truth over titles. Camille and Jack embraced a quieter life. They sold the luxury cars, the art, the country estate. The penthouse remained, but it felt different now. Not a monument to wealth, but a home. A place where laughter echoed and baby Oliver's cries bounced softly off the marble walls. They had survived the storm, and under calmer skies, they were building something more meaningful than legacy. They were building a life. The first day of spring painted Seattle in a warm, golden light. After a long and brutal winter, both in weather and in life, Camille felt the sun on her skin and smiled. On their balcony, Jack sat in a lounge chair cradling Oliver against his chest. The baby slept, tiny chest rising and falling in sync with his father's steady heartbeat. Camille stepped outside. Her bare feet met the cool stone. She paused, taking in the view. Jack was no longer the glossy heir to a billion-dollar name. He was something else now, something better, real. She sat down beside him, the skyline stretching before them like a quiet promise. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked, barely louder than the breeze. "Blowing it all up, the company, the name?" Jack didn't answer right away. He looked at Oliver, then out across the city, the skyline he used to think he owned. "I regret how it happened," he said finally. "The pain it caused, the silence between us when I should have told you everything, but I don't regret doing what was right." He turned to her. "I had to choose our future over my father's." Camille nodded, emotion welling in her chest. "You chose truth over power," she whispered, "and somehow we still found each other." Jack's eyes gleamed in the morning light. "You gave me a reason to be brave," he said. "You and him." Oliver stirred in his arms, letting out a soft sigh. Camille leaned into Jack's shoulder, wrapping an arm around them both. Together, they sat, wrapped in a silence that wasn't empty, but full. A silence that only comes after surviving the storm. They had lost nearly everything the world once told them mattered. But here in the heart of the city, sunlight on their faces and their son in their arms, they had gained something unshakable. A bond that could never be bought or broken. And that was everything. So the story is over, our wonderful friends. Are you still here at this hour? If you're still listening, if your heart is quietly lingering in this moment, maybe it's because something in this story echoed inside you. Let's sit with that. Not with judgment, not with conclusions. Just presence. What we've just experienced isn't just a tale of scandal and redemption. It's a mirror A reminder that life, no matter how grand or broken, can shift dramatically with a single decision to live in truth. Jack and Camille's journey teaches us this. Legacy without integrity is hollow, and love without honesty isn't love at all. They faced public scrutiny, betrayal, and fear, yet chose courage over comfort. In doing so, they shed everything the world said mattered and found what truly did. We're all walking through our own versions of this story. Maybe you're holding back your truth. Maybe the expectations of others are drowning your voice. Or maybe, like Camille, you're quietly shouldering more than anyone sees. Just know this: the wound is the place where the light enters you. Rumi. Pain has its purpose. It softens, it clarifies, it calls us home to ourselves. So I invite you now, if this story moved you, even in a small way, like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Let's spread stories that heal, that show strength not in perfection, but in vulnerability. And if you're holding something fragile tonight, whether it's fear, hope, or the first tremble of a new beginning, know that you're not alone. You're not broken, you're becoming. Until next time, be gentle with your story. It's more powerful than you know.